And finally, on BBC Focus, a programme examining the planning and business decisions behind building a new multiplex cinema.
Steve Nibbs is the Managing Director of UCI Cinemas in the UK. UCI opened the first multiplex cinema in Britain in 1985 at Milton Keynes. Since then, they've built over 20 more cinemas around the country. Building a new multiplex cinema costs millions of pounds, and the companies who invest in these constructions hope to get their money back and to make a profit.
The issue about how we recoup our investment and how we arrive at the decisions about where to build outside of just the basic demographics, that if we assume there's enough people there to support 10 screens or 12 screens or 15, is a factor of several things. Firstly, it's ticket price and the fact that we consider that the movies are going to carry on being successful. Hollywood and the British film market and the European and the world market is going to continue to put through and have available to us, films that our customers want to see. And then we have to look at where is ticket price going in terms of, is it going to keep up with inflation, is it going to be ahead of inflation, how aspirational is cinema, and how much can we charge for our product. And a very important part of our investment decision as well is the income which can be derived from everything other than ticket sales, so popcorn and drinks, t-shirts and badges, sales from the bar, and those are becoming an increasingly important proportion of the pie. 10 years ago, sales other than ticket sales would have been less than 20% of revenue. They account now for more than 25% of revenue, and that figure is increasing all of the time. Because the buildings are costing so much more to build and to operate now, we have to be looking to find more attractive ways and better ways of retaining more of our customers' spend when they come to us. So all the things we're doing in terms of adding bars and lounge areas and retail areas is to get customers to have a longer pre-show and post-show chill-out time, as we call it, where we're encouraging them to come in, browse around the offers before they go into the cinema, go and see the cinema, and then come out afterwards and have a drink and go to the restaurants that are nearby the cinema as well.
So, a multiplex cinema offers us a lot of opportunities to spend money. But a number of factors need considering before you build a cinema.
It really comes back to looking at the location, the geographical and demographics of the location, and saying what is the most appropriate offering for that location. If the most appropriate offering is 6 screens, we will build a 6-screen cinema in there. If it's a 20-screener, we will build a 20-screener in there. But what's important is you actually have a consistency of quality, so that if your 6-screener is what you build, then you build it to the same high specification as you would a 20-screener.
One of the questions for the cinema industry in the UK, and this is going to happen in European countries as well, is are we going to follow the example of North America, where you've seen cinemas open across the road from each other, literally. Because of the planning process in the UK, which is very strict and very difficult to find sites now, particularly out of town, I don't think you're going to see cinemas built across the road from each other. But it's certainly true to say that we're going to see cinemas open across town from each other in towns which have, you would think on the face of it, couldn't support 2 multiplexes.
If you're in an area where there is low levels of screening already and large numbers of population, and the development you're going into has the land, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be looking at 18, 20 screens, whatever is appropriate. But if you're going into an area where the demographics are, in terms of population base, are quite low, or there is quite a level of competition already, and you don't realistically believe that you'll get the attendance to support an 18, 20 screener, then why would you build one?
The 12 years since the opening of The Point at Milton Keynes have seen a distinct change in the location of new cinemas.
In the 1980s and the early 1990s, the trend not only in leisure but in retail particularly, which led some of our development, was to have out-of-town shopping and leisure centres. And the reason for that is that that's where people lived. It's where the shopping centres were being built because of the road infrastructure and the transport infrastructure generally. The land was available, and there weren't the town centre locations available to build very big, modern, up-to-date shopping and leisure malls. So we were driven very, very much by that. What's happened in the 1990s, and the middle 1990s that we're in now, is that there's been a political and environmental change in people's attitudes and the attitude of government, which has wanted to see city centres developed more for not only people to work in, but for them to come back and live in, and also for them to spend their leisure time in, particularly in the evenings and the weekends. So there's now a big move towards encouraging leisure companies and retailers and restaurateurs and bar operators to help regenerate city centres.
If a multiplex is located outside a city centre, the owners must consider how members of the audience without cars are going to get there.
We've subsidised bus routes, and we've done other incentives as well with bus companies, and also in the privatised world with buses, that it doesn't take very long for a bus operator to realise that with a multiplex cinema which is doing upwards of 1 million people a year, there's going to be a certain proportion of that audience, it could be more than 10%, want to go there by bus. So for that operator there's a huge incentive for him to be putting on a service even without us compensating him for it. You won't find any sites built now that can't prove to the planners that they actually have some form of transport, public transport infrastructure taken account of, either for a subsidised bus route or there's a tram stop nearby or a local train station nearby the kids can use.
Once you've solved the access problem, it's then up to the multiplex owner to make sure we, the audience, know the difference between one multiplex and another.
Multiplexes generally have a problem of differentiation because we are all put under that one banner, and one of the things that drives UCI on is how we are going to be distinct from our competition. There are some strong brand names in the marketplace. Virgin and Warner Brothers are big brand names to be competing against.
The cinema itself is the gateway to the film, if you like, and what we need to do is convince customers to kind of choose our gateway, choose our cinema to go and see a film. Obviously the film is the reason that they're going to go, but what we're trying to do is actually get them to choose our cinema rather than somebody else's. In the past, where there was far less competition in the marketplace, cinemas probably had the luxury of not really needing to, because what they could have got away with, and what they did get away with, was the film distributor spending an awful lot of money marketing the film itself and just being in the right location. So when they opened their doors, you know, a good proportion of customers would come through.
With more cinema chains opening more multiplexes, owners need to attract audiences and to ensure loyalty to their particular cinema.
Loyalty is a fascinating issue, I think, in the cinema market at the moment. I think a very easy answer is to say, right, we need a loyalty scheme, and you set up a kind of a points-based scheme where points mean prizes, and the more visits you go, the more you get. I'm not sure that that's appropriate for the cinema market in that kind of form. It's very, very successful in other retail sectors, but the frequency of purchase in other retail sectors is much, much higher. The average visit to a cinema is around 6 visits a year, and you've got to offer one hell of an incentive to actually make that beneficial and make people switch their purchasing habits. So what we try and do is actually reward customers and maintain their loyalty just by giving kind of an added reason to choose us. So in terms of the service that we offer, in terms of the promotions that we provide, what we want to try and do is every time you go into UCI cinema, there's something different going on that, that we wouldn't have in some competitor cinemas. You know, things that are exclusive to us.
There you go. Would you like a drink with that?
Promotions that we do tend to fall into 3 categories, I guess. We have very specific objectives for every single promotion, but the 3 categories would be something I term traffic building, which is basically getting customers through the door, and we would do those through participating with a media partner or with a third-party business such as HMV or Blockbuster, ones we've done relatively recently. A second type we would do are what I call kind of reward promotions, which is nothing to do with getting people through the door. It's just about giving them something, an added value, an extra kind of benefit for coming to UCI, and just as sort of a thank you, really.
Here you go.
And the third type would be retail promotions, which is basically about maximising profit on concession stands, and also adding again a bit more fun. I mean, rather than just being sort of hard-nosed in terms of kind of trying to do, you know, either discounted activities or kind of additional volume kind of purchases. What we try and do is tie it into something to make it a lot of fun. So, for example, we're just about to launch Lost World promotion, which will obviously tie into the Jurassic Park sequel, and it's all very much dinosaurs this and dinosaurs that, an awful lot of fun involved, as well as obviously trying to kind of maximise expenditure on the concession stand.
The multiplexes of the 90s need to consider who they're trying to attract to their cinemas. With 10 or more screens to fill, they can't just market themselves to one sector of the public.
It very much depends on what you're offering, on what day and what time of day. If you come along to a multiplex at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, you'll see kids from about age 3 upwards, some with their older brothers and sisters, some with their mums and dads and some on their own. And the cinema is able to appeal to them. Later in the day, when the teenagers start to come out and, you know, they're looking for things to do in the afternoon, when they've perhaps been into town and done their shopping, you know, the cinema changes into a more upbeat, a bit louder and a bit brasher. And then in the evening, when you're getting people who've been out for a meal or are going to go to a meal later, and the more 18 and the 15 rated film product comes on, you know, they will be attracted to the cinema. And multiplexes have to appeal to everybody. We cannot just rely on the 14 to 24-year-olds, because if we just rely on that market, we won't survive. We have to be able to appeal to very young children, to teenagers, to people in their 30s and 40s, and increasingly, you know, the greying population as well.
The way to reach people who aren't necessarily going to be going as frequently as the core market are really to go out into their world. You know, if they're not coming into ours, if they're not being targeted through trailers in cinema, for example, then we have to go out into theirs and say, come on, come into the cinema, there's some fantastic films to see.
So it's critical that as that multiplexes and cinemas generally learn to appeal to an audience that is not just the core 14 to 24-year-olds and the blockbusters. And we're going to do that in a number of ways. The first thing is to offer films which offer that choice and that selection. So you're not just showing, you know, the latest Disney or the latest, you know, blockbuster, but we have a choice of films which appeal to all ages, and that people from 35 feel that they've got, you know, something to choose from outside of just a summer blockbuster and Christmas fair. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to put in our cinemas things which outside of the film offer which appeal to people. So give people a nice cafe area with comfortable seats that they can sit in and relax in and feel, you know, feel comfortable with. Make sure that security is very visible so people feel safe, and that they feel that if they bring their children with them, that they'll happily be in that environment as well. And the third thing we need to do is make sure that we tell them that we've got all these offers by carefully targeting the offers through the right magazines, the right papers, by using radio, and perhaps even using television advertising as well, which cinema hasn't done historically because of the cost of it. So we're going to have to be a lot more imaginative in how we sell ourselves and be a lot more subtle about it in the future.
Multiplex chains need to be imaginative, but they also need to think ahead, building up an audience for the future.
We did some research to actually find out what young children thought about cinema and what they, you know, how they felt it impacted upon them. And what we found out absolutely amazed us. What we found out was that cinema was actually considered by young children to be a kind of adult environment and not particularly child-friendly. And we found that, you know, astonishing, given that the number of the amount of film product out there that is child-focused, like Disney. You think, well, where's this coming from? And when we probed more into it and got more and more detail, what we actually found was that what children felt was that everything was on a grown-up scale, so why should it be relevant to them? The screen, obviously in a cinema, the screen is going to be huge, but they're used to TV and computer screens at home. The foyers are very sort of cavernous in their scales. The popcorn, everything, even the popcorn and Cokes are very large and very adult portioned. So it wasn't that they felt intimidated or prohibited by it, but they felt that cinema was not necessarily designed for them. So what we did is we set about creating the UC&I characters to actually say, look, UC&I is for children, and the UC&I characters is a way of kind of talking to the children and giving something that is saying, you know, this is for you.
We went into schools and worked with art classes really from blank sheets of paper, taking our artists in, and rather Rolf Harris style, sort of just develop these characters in front of the kids, starting with different areas, different names of characters, looking at food, like Hot Dog and Clarissa Cup and things like that, or looking at the cinema, Tommy Ticket, Pete the Projectionist. And what came out in the end was a really massively favourite, was a tiny little blue strip of film, and we called him I. And then next to that, suddenly they started saying, because they take things so literally, was that, well, what happens when everybody goes home and it's dark and he's all on his own? What's he going to do? He needs a friend. So it was the boys that suggested it was a girl, but couldn't be a girlfriend and absolutely couldn't be a sister. So we developed a girl character who was a friend called Yusi.
Aye, what do you think you're doing? Don't get your negatives in a twist, Yusi. I'm just having a bit of fun.
We first started looking at what sort of shoes should they wear, and of course everybody had their own ideas, especially the girls on the girls' shoes. And there was the problem then of, well, that shoe might be out of fashion next week, you know, and we can't keep redesigning this character. And in the end, it was a child that said, well, Mickey Mouse always wears the same shoes. Put some cartoon shoes on them, and so it was in that way we developed them every stage. I mean, it took 9 months to develop the characters from a blank sheet.
As well as using the characters to attract children to the cinema, Yusi and I are also put to use in the sales area of the cinema itself.
We introduced a film feast, which was really a combo meal of popcorn, juice, drink and sweets, but which was at a price and a size that parents wanted. Because whereas, again, the kids loved the food at the cinema, Mum would always say, well, it's A, masses of it, and B, it's terribly expensive. So there was a choice. You either have popcorn or you have a fizzy drink. You can't have the two. So the film feast was developed, again, using UC&I, and we now have what we call, each film feast has a cup, which is a collector cup, and there are 4 to collect, so that the kids come back again, sort of, and they've got a different thing to collect. We developed a 40-second animated sequence featuring the characters. The first one was really introducing the characters, and the second one being now much more sort of saying, well, that there is a film feast for kids, there's a club, there's also birthday parties.
You're all together and you want a treat, a fantastic film and something to eat. It's us again! And there's Slippery Jim!
And I'm Trouble.
And we're going to show you all the great things you can do at this cinema.
You can see a film on a big screen.
You can have this super film feast
That's mine.
With popcorn and a cool drink.
a comic all about us.
All about me.
But if it's your birthday,
And you want something really special.
you can have it, a birthday party!
Right here in the cinema.
So if you're at the movies, you can have all this. It's something that your friends won't want to miss. And don't forget to invite us. Movie time.
Mum was saying, well, we bring the child for a birthday party, but then we'll take them around the corner to have a meal. So what we've developed is the complete birthday party. So they get the ticket, they get a film feast, they get lots of goodies in a bag, and all the new cinemas are having party rooms. So that after the film and having their film feast and bits and pieces, they then go into a party room and play a few games. The comics are done on a regular basis, and there is a first visit certificate, which actually is just a certificate that all the kids get that they like when they go to the cinema. We developed costume characters for each of the cinemas, trained every member of staff, not just to use the costumes, but also in really how to talk to kids. The training sessions that we ran were put in really in 2 sections. The first was really just talking to the staff about kids and about the different developmental stages, about when they respond to different ways of talking to them. Also how to deal with them, you know, if they're pinching sweets out of the pick and mix or something, but in a reasonable way. And then the second half of the training was really telling them all about the characters, where they'd come from, so they knew the story. There are a lot of things they can't do, and a lot of things that they have to do in the way they walk, the way they bend down to talk to the children. We did some dance routines, and how, without speaking, they can be funny.
So much for the theory and the marketing tools to get audiences to the cinema. But every time a new cinema opens, you have to attract a new audience. At the end of 1996, UCI opened a new cinema in Dublin.
UCI opened its third cinema in Dublin at the end of 1996 at Blanchardstown Shopping Centre. We already operate 12 screens at Taller and 10 screens at Coolock. And on the face of it, you would think, well, you know, why open a third site in Dublin? Well, there are several reasons. Firstly, we like to be located in major shopping centres, and we look at all those opportunities as they come up. And Blanchardstown, which is 750,000 square feet of prime retail on the outskirts of Dublin, seemed a good opportunity in its own right. We then took a look at the area, and the way that Dublin is growing is very much to the north-west sector. There are actually 5,000 homes being constructed over the next couple of years in that area, and it's the way that the Dublin is growing, because it's grown as far as it can to the south. It's now starting to grow to the north. So it's going to have a new catchment area just within its own environment.
What you've got to do is you've got to set a series of objectives, and the objectives that you'd set obviously drives the marketing campaign to launch that cinema. The objectives have got to be customer based. You've got to say, okay, we want to get X number of customers through over a given period. Once you set those objectives, you can then set about an actual marketing strategy that delivers them. Which is exactly what we did with Blanchardstown. What we tried to do was create a level of awareness that UCI was opening up in Blanchardstown, and kind of convert that into some level of interest, and just take it through the decision process to make people have a desire to go and try it out, and actually then getting them to go into the cinema. The way we did that with the campaign was we split the campaign in half. We had a teaser section and a reveal section. And the campaign was themed around our tagline, which is The Great Escape. And so what we tried to do was create a kind of a feeling in people's minds that they want to escape from the humdrum day-to-day activities that they might be doing, like washing up, or on the bus, or in school, or in the office, and actually get them to go and escape to Blanchardstown. The campaign was then crossed over from advertising through to a number of what we term below-the-line activities, which is promotional direct marketing activities. And what's important is you have an integrated campaign, so that the campaign image is reflected on everything that you do. So, for example, we produced fake wheel clamps, and we had those put on cars in areas that we thought either we could say were boring or could be controversially boring. And it said on the wheel clamp, move this car to a less boring place, and on it was a parking ticket for an offer to go into UCI Blanchardstown.
What's that for? Do I have to move the car?
We put those on cars throughout Dublin, and we got a fantastic response rate, but also we got a lot of PR coverage out of it, particularly as we put them on cars outside competitive cinemas. We also did Hollywood hit squads, where we had celebrity lookalikes going with a whole bunch of paparazzi going into the pubs and bars in Dublin, and just sort of again suggesting that Blanchardstown was the place to be, and giving information and leaflets to go and try it out, as well as a lot of kind of more kind of hard hitting activities with direct marketing through various kind of mailings and leaflets and so on. Yeah, the opening party, I believe, is very important, but is always overemphasised in a cinema launch. I always believe that the emphasis should be placed on the customer and not on the industry. The party is very much an industry thing, and obviously that's important, but it's profile. It's nothing to do with getting people through the doors. What I wanted to do is, if we're going to spend money on a party, I wanted to make sure that we got fantastic PR out of it. So what we did, we invited Patsy Kensit to come and open the cinema, partly because she was relatively controversial at the time. There was lots of speculation about whether Liam Gallagher would come and attend as well, and that got an awful lot of kind of column centimetres in the press. The speculation of whether he'd come with her, and she has various kind of links, previous links with Ireland that were also kind of exploited by the media. And so we got an awful lot of coverage that way, and the party was a way, really, a means to an end, a means to get the PR out to the press and out to the consumer.
Another successful opening. But each success needs building on, and no cinema owner can afford to be complacent.
The cinemas that we're building today are probably about as far away from the cinemas that we built in the mid-80s as the cinemas that they kind of replaced almost. The multiplex concept was absolutely unique and a fantastic contribution to cinema in the mid-80s. What we're doing now is saying, well, what's happened is that, yes, we were the first into the marketplace with that concept, but a lot of Me Too competitors have come in and replicated the concept. So what we're now looking at is kind of revolutionising cinema again to make sure that we keep ahead of the competition. So what we're really looking at is kind of Multiplex 2 and creating an environment which is more than just a box with 10, 12 auditoriums in. What we're looking at doing is actually kind of extending the escapism away from just the screen itself. We also think of the film as being the point of escape and the point of kind of entertainment. We're trying to extend that away from just the film so that the minute you walk in the door of a UCI cinema, of a new one, that you will actually get a whole kind of sense of escapism. It's out of this world sort of experience. By building more cinemas, what we're actually doing is providing more opportunity for people to kind of buy into movies and to actually experience movies. So what we hope will happen is the market will grow, more people will go to a cinema more often. If that doesn't happen, if the market stays exactly the same size but with an awful lot more screens out there, then obviously the saturation will occur very, very quickly. But you've got to believe the visit per capita in the UK is about half that it is in the US. And so you've got to believe that there is actually growth opportunities still available. And as long as the market keeps growing, then locations to actually, those gateways are referred to actually experience film can continue to grow with it.
One of the problems with building a lot of screens is that we are creating a monster that needs feeding 52 weeks of the year. And we're very reliant, as we always have been, on our relationship with the international filmmaking community to keep making films that the public wants to see.
Obviously the cinema exhibition sector is entirely dependent upon the film product. Without the film product there's no films to show and we'll have no customers. But you have to have a leap of faith, I guess, in that the studios are producing more and more films year on year, spending more and more money year on year marketing those films. And you just have to have a belief that we're spending £100 million in the UK, and obviously we wouldn't spend that if we didn't believe that perhaps we would get the audience in.